So if you could, let's look at the monitor. Can you just talk me through a little about this ceremony this morning?
We always start gathering a little bit after 7, and it's police, fire, emergency, all the EMS people, MZ people, just citizens who want to come be a part of it. And I've done it every year since I've been mayor for the past 16 years, and as we've done it, you see people from different walks of life out there. Mm-hmm. You see our firemen come out in their what I call their battle gear. They're out in some really heavy stuff that they go rushing into fires with. They're there. All the officers of the fire command, all the officers of the police command are there. A number of officers are there who work SWAT and different things like that. And we all start gathering about 7:15. We line up about 7:35. So 7:46 is the time, and we all get lined up. We bring out the honor guard. Everybody salutes. Whether if you got hats on, you saluted like this. If you were a civilian, you put your hand over your heart. Mm-hmm. And it was at that moment is always very it tugs at your heartstrings because you go back and you quickly go back 20 some odd years, 22 years, and we always do that. We right at 7:46 there's a call out from dispatch saying that this is for 30 seconds we're going to run all sirens because this is the time when the first plane hit. We start running sirens after that. Our honor guard comes out, and the honor guard is made up of everybody in EMS, from HMZ to fire to police to SWAT to the county sheriff's office. And they come out, they raise the flag, and then they drop it to half-mast. It's a very quick ceremony. Mm-hmm. It's a quick ceremony, but it hits right at a time that, everybody goes back, goes back that 22 years, and you think about what was going on at that time, what you knew about that time. So many, anybody who's, 25 years or younger, which there's a lot of them, but, they don't realize what we felt during that time. And I think it's an important history lesson to be played time and time again so that they do remember it.
Was there a good turnout this morning?
Good turnout. Good turnout. We had a number of people, just citizens, come in, and there was and of course between our guys, the sheriff's guys, the volunteer departments, and everything else, there was a good turnout. Yeah.
So you were not you were not a member of even the city council back then. Was it Great Spirits? Is that the company you were running?
Yeah, I had Great Spirits. I had a real estate firm.
Oh wow.
That I ran. Did property management. I did quite a few things to put food on the table.
Sure.
A question for you is: everybody has somebody that was at 9/11 or had something to do with 9/11. My story is I had a friend who was a pilot, and he was sick that day. Had he not been sick that day, he would have flown one of those aircraft. Mm-hmm. And so, do you know of anybody?
I don't have a personal story on
Right.
it. I really don't. My personal story really comes from everybody's reactions to it.
Sure.
I was running a little business back then, a retail business, and I came in, and they were sitting there in the retail business. Said, "Should we close today? Should we close today?" I said, "Do you think terrorists are going to attack every retail store in America? I think we're pretty safe here, and we need to show that they don't win. That we stay open, and we stay open for a reason, to show them that they don't win. Those kind of our reactions to what happened was really one of the things that I watched, and we did a lot of making sure that everybody was safe, but also I think one of the most important things we did was show them that we're not closing down because of the action of 15 people. We're going to continue to do what we do as a country, and we will always remember, but we won't close ourselves down because of that.
And you said you were at Gibson's eating breakfast, watching that.
So Gibson, we were coming up to pay, and the little TV was over the cash register, and we saw that, and it was we thought it was serious, but then when the second plane came in, everybody knew that it was really serious at that point.
Your story reminds me a little bit of Bill Marriott. In fact, so if we go back to we're only going to touch on this briefly, but in 1980, right, is when you came to Huntsville.
Sure.
My understanding is your family had a store up here, and they needed someone to run it, and you assumed the loan, and then within a few years you were able to pay off the loan, and then eventually you sell it, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to JW. Was the founder of Marriott. He was the father, right? And Bill comes along, and he's like 25 years old. You were 24 at the time.
Yep.
And he's like, they had a hotel. They were in restaurants, and it wasn't doing well. And so he's like, "Hey, Dad, can I run this?" He's like, "What do you know about running a hotel?" Like, not nothing more than you, because it's not going well. So I just figured I'd take a stab at it, and he just launched into the hotel side of the business. And I just was, and when I was doing the research, and coming across these experiences, I thought, man, that reminds me a little bit of the Marriott story. Just how you're 24 years old and you move up here on a I don't know, I guess an educated whim.
Oh, yeah. My dad had always worked for the Britling Cafeteria organization. It was cafeteria buffet style, meat and taters type place.
Like a Chuck-a-rama or something.
Yeah, and he always worked for him, and he moved himself. He was manager. He was an assistant manager, then a manager, then general manager of the chain. And a lot of people don't realize there were about 13, 14 restaurants in that group. And then the man who owned it cut him a deal, and he was able to buy into it, and he actually owned about a third of it. And so I was just coming out of school at that point. He said, "Listen, I've moved into an ownership position here. You want to jump in with me? Let's try and see if we can make it work." And we worked for 2 or 3 years. We changed over some to the buffet style and did some other stuff. And I guess we were together 4 years really. And they decided, he and his new partner who had come in decided that, hey, let's sell these things out, and it's our time to sell them out. So they sold out all the units, and they couldn't find anybody to buy the one in Huntsville, and it was doing good numbers. And my dad said to me, he said, "Listen, you're going to need a job after this, and you might want to look at that place in Huntsville. It's a good place." And so I said, "I don't know, Dad." And I said, I don't need to be, $250,000 in debt. I'm only 24. And he looked at me and said, "The wisest thing anybody ever said." He said, "Son, what have you got to lose?" And I thought about that, and he said, "I've seen your car. Nobody'd take it. I've seen, your clothes are in boxes. You don't have any real furniture except for frames in a queen size bed. You've got a pretty good stereo system, but nobody's going to want that. And it's on concrete blocks with shellac boards." And he said, "You really don't have a whole lot to lose." And so I drove up here, and I looked at the place and everything else, and then I drove back down, and I was thinking about it over that weekend. And I came in Monday. I said, "Dad, you're right. I don't have anything to lose, and so I'm going to give it a shot." And so we were able to. I came up. I guess it was about July 4th weekend. I came up in 1980 and had bought the restaurant, and I had to find $10,000 to put down. So I went to every bank, I went to SBA and everybody, and got some great pep talks, but nobody wanted to invest in partial ownership of a restaurant. And I can understand why. But when we finally got down to it, I realized that I got to take over the place as of August 1st. And August 16th, we were going to close. And between August 1st and August 16th, we would do $50,000 worth of business. And I said, "Wow, I can pull the $10,000 out of the float, and I can pay for this." And I thought I was so cool. I said, "I'm the first one to ever think about this." Later, you find out it's an equity buyout because you use the company's money to be able to buy it out. But I was able to start from there. And it was a great 10 years. It was not the most profitable 10 years of my life, but it was a great 10 years. I learned how to be the HR manager. I learned how to be the payroll manager. I learned how to figure out financial statements real well. Got to learn how to do some cooking. Learned how to work on dishwashers. I learned a little bit of everything that sets you up for the future. And out of all that, you figure out, what's important to you, what's important to you, to your family. You start realizing that, this thing called time that you thought you had all the world of, all of a sudden you don't. When you're working 80 hours a week, you come home, go to bed, get up, and go back to work. And then when you start having a family, how do you continue to do that 80 hours a week and still, take care of your family and still give the attention that you're supposed to your family? So, great learning place. It was a place to learn a lot of life lessons, but also some very, very practical lessons in the business world.
So was that on South Parkway?
That was at the corner of Governor's Drive and Memorial Parkway, right there where the Huntsville Medical Mall is today.
Really?
In fact, 10, 11 years later, Huntsville Medical Mall was the one who bought us out. They had bought the mall and were going to do massive renovations, and we'd already been through one set of renovations, which was not very healthy for us. And so we were about to go through a second one, and we said, "Hey guys, buy us out." And they were very kind. They bought us out, and we paid off bills. And that's when I went into real estate, and it was it was a great run.
Couple just quick questions. Where in Birmingham did you live specifically?
I lived down on Rocky Ridge Road in Birmingham. Went to
Birmingham.
Berry High School.
Berry High School.
Way back when Berry was a county high school at that point.
Okay. And I know you comment on this, but I think naturally it has helped you become a good mayor to understand small business, right? And if you're deciding on policies or such that will have an impact on business, right? I think that's essentially what's made you very effective is you've lived it.
Yeah.
I mean, you lived it 24/7, 365, right? And trying to grind and put food on the table for your family in various disciplines.
Well, the restaurant business was great. I saw 1,500 people a week, and seeing those 1,500 people, you learned how to get along with people real quick. If you didn't, you weren't going to be around very long. And you learn that, but then going into the real estate world was great because it taught you how to structure deals, how to make things work, how important it was that you had proper cash flow, and how important it was that you had the proper amount down, so that you can pay your bills in the future, because you're not just paying your bill for 12 months in a row. You're paying your bill probably for 180 months for the next 15 years.
No, were you doing residential or commercial real estate?
Started off, I did both commercial and residential, whatever put food on the table. Like so many people, when you start off a small business, you're going to try to do it all. Finally ended up doing only commercial, and we were mostly into warehouses. Nothing really sexy, but warehouses that worked very well, and and they paid their bills, and so you could work those pretty well. And in warehouses, I did the property management on them and some other things too. So all that kind of gave you a sense of how you needed to put things together, and what was important, what wasn't. And the very, very first thing you learned was the contract was the most important thing, because that dictated what you were going to do. The first thing we did as mayor coming in was Redstone Gateway, and the contract on that was, good gosh, must have been 60 pages. But reading that contract and going through it, it was very, very important to us, because we were putting out about $70 million of taxpayers' money, and $70 million, which was going to be paid back by COPT and by the buildings that they were built. But we had to find a way to structure it where we felt comfortable that we knew that we'd be paid back quickly, or if it was, or that they bared the burden if they didn't pay it back in the time frame that we were looking at. And and it all fell back to the old real estate days and the real estate contracts that you had run. That was, I think that was one of the things that helped me in the mayor, helped me being mayor, is that you understood how this worked.
Yeah.
So you, you ran and became mayor, but your first coming in was you actually ran for city council.
Yep.
And got the position. So what? What
1984.
Right.
I've been in town 4 years.
Okay.
And
By the way, that was an amazing year. 1984, I think, is one of the most amazing years.
Is it really?
Yeah, I think so.
Well,
Mike,
1984 was an amazing year. I think somebody around here was born in 1984, probably.
No, not me. I'm older than that.
Okay, but I had seen some city council things, and then we had a lot of the city council. Well, there was one or two, maybe three members of city council just giving Mayor Davis down the road, and I liked Mayor Davis. I thought that he was, he was very good. I mean, gosh, he made. I think when I came on council, he made $30,000 a year, and worked 70 hours a week being mayor and going to all the events and everything else. And I said I'd like to see if I could run and help him. So I ran. There were myself, Wiley Day, Jim Putman, Coach was in there. There's four of us in the race. Four of us in the race. And I ran, and we were just too dumb to know we weren't supposed to win, and we won. I mean, won straight out without a runoff. And maybe it was helping that I saw 1,500 people a week down at Britling's. And, some of the maybe I got some votes out of that, but it really. And we were running city at large at that point. So I ran city at large. I won the race, and I came to council. And one of the first votes was on Joe Davis Stadium. This was back then. You came in office, you actually were sworn in November, but I think our race ended in August. And so from September to November, you were sitting in just as a watcher or bystander or somebody learning the ropes and everything else. And so for a month and a half, I got to sit there and watch how this worked. And right at that time was when Larry Smitto had come to Joe Davis and he was going to set up a baseball team, a AA baseball team here in the city of Huntsville. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there, and there was a very conservative minister who came up, and he looked at all the council members and said, "You're building this for families so that families can come to baseball, and you're making it baseball families apple pie." And they all said, "Yes, yes, we are." And he said, "Well, and you're going to allow beer around our children?" And immediately you saw every one of the council members, "No, I'm not going to allow beer. I'm not going to allow beer." When they got down, every one of them had said, "No, we're not going to allow beer in that stadium because of the little children." And it was very interesting. Larry Smitto stood up and said, "Well, no beer, no team. See you later." And he walked out. And I'll never forget the next meeting they had. The JCs showed up, and they said, "Listen, we want baseball. Whether it means us having beer or not, we want to have baseball in this city. We want something to do, and we're looking for it. And we're looking for y'all to show leadership and do this." And finally, they end up flipping a couple of votes, and they won a vote to build the stadium. They set up one section as a non-drinking section, which was kind of a concession, and it was a good concession. And we ended up building the stadium. I think it cost $6.2 million to build the stadium. We went through all these reiterations. Everybody brought in models of what they were going to build and everything. And we ended up with an architect, and we ended up putting up the stadium for $6.2 million. Now, you fast forward from that 1984, 85 period, 84, and fast forward, 39 years, to remodel Joe Davis Stadium cost $29 million. And but back in that day, we didn't have the big boards. We didn't have the video boards. We didn't have a lot of the amenities that you have today. And I would argue that the stadium that we have today is probably one of the nicest soccer, football, hockey stadiums in the Southeast.
Yeah. Wow. So you got to see two amazing things on that property. Yeah. The original build out, and then with the athletics, right? Yeah. That was the Huntsville Stars.
Yeah, they were part of Oakland A's, and and I got to see the very first game that they had there. Then I got to see the last game that they had there under some bad ownership. And the first thing that when I came in as mayor, the Stars were still in action, and their owner said, "Build me a stadium, and I'll keep baseball here." And I said, well, your reputation isn't that good. You're not doing that. You're not doing any promotions. You're not doing anything to bring people in. You're having 500 people a game. I said, show me something. Show me that y'all are going to invest in this area and do some investment, and we'll talk at that point. And his response was, build me a stadium. I'll keep baseball here. And over the next 2 years, he ran it down and down and down. They would get a vendor to bring something in. They bring something in, they'd send him a bill. A month later, they'd have to send the bill to New York. If he was in town, he would have to personally write the check. Then he'd have to send it back to the manager. Manager would have to get it to the group. I mean, just totally. I mean, and I don't know if it was his goal to run it in the ground, but it did get run in the ground, and there was just nothing there. Then they ended up moving that franchise down to Biloxi, and we were very fortunate that Madison got into the running on it. Madison got in the running to bring a team to Madison, and when they did, Paul and I talked, and I said, Paul, just make sure that you know who your ownership is, because as long as our ownership had some local preference or had some professional people who knew what they were doing, we were in great shape. But once it turned over to somebody who was a part-time attorney and his buddies who had been in Vietnam with him, once it turned over to them, they just didn't have the expertise to be able to actually run it. And so after Paul and I talked, there was one point during the discussions about it coming out to Madison, they said, well, if you don't want it, we'll go to Huntsville. Huntsville's talking to us all the time. And so Paul called me and said, are y'all talking to those guys? And he said, just tell me up front if you are. I'll be glad. No, I said, no, it's a negotiating tool. You hold your spurs to the saddle and make sure that you get the deal that you need to get. And he did, and I think it was a good thing for both of us.
One question I'd love to ask is, did you get to see Michael Jordan when he played for Birmingham?
I did. I got to see Michael Jordan, and I think that was after I was off council, I believe, if I remember right. I had season tickets for a couple of years after I got off council, and probably 4 or 5 years. And I saw him come up in his bus. Remember, he bought the Birmingham organization a bus because they had a radio bus, and he bought them a brand new bus to be able to travel around in.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody hitting the ball out in the outfield where he was, and you want to talk about somebody quick. Boom, he was right under it, catching it. And but he had as tall as he was, he had a huge strike zone, huge, and it made it kind of difficult for his hitting power, but it was special to see Michael Jordan out there.
Yeah, that's so cool. When I'd refer you to go watch the episode I did with Chad recently. I think it's like episode 59 where we talk about the soccer team and the difference in the way Nashville Soccer Club run. The say or the oversight, the involvement they have at the next pro level versus the Pandas and the Angels is there's a nuance there that's interesting, right? They're not the same.
Very interesting. It's local ownership. I mean, it means something having people who are running it to who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
When they first came to talk to me about soccer, I said, soccer? Are y'all kidding me? Who's going to come watch soccer? They said, well, if you go to Atlanta, the Atlanta soccer team is out-polling the football team, NFL team. If you go to Nashville, you're going to see 27,000 people in stands watching soccer in the Titans Stadium. And I said, numbers are impressive, but I'm going to do it. So we took a whole group up. We went up one Sunday afternoon, and I went over early because I wanted to get there to see the tailgating experience. And they had a huge tailgating experience, throwing footballs back and forth and cooking up barbecue, doing this, selling things over there. It was just like a little carnival and a fair, and it happened every Sunday when they played. And so they're sitting there, and we catch up with the ownership. I don't know if they knew that we came in early just to check them out. Well, I did. And we started talking to them and had a great conversation. And then we went in the stadium, and it was the old Titan Stadium. but people started coming and coming and coming. And that day, 27,000 people were sitting there watching professional soccer in Nashville. And I watched about half of the match, and at that time I didn't understand anything about soccer, and I was kind of watching. I wasn't sure what I was watching, and I didn't want to ask them to show them how red I was, how I had no idea what was going on. And so I watched about half, and then I went and got in the car and came back home. But it was a great telltale experience when you started talking to them, and then when you met the owners, John Ingram and his family, and Ian Ayers, and hear about his experience in soccer, and he talks with an English accent, so you know he's got to be good.
Exactly.
He knows what he's doing. Then I watched a couple of episodes of Ted Lasso, and but finally I read the book The Club, and the book The Club is very interesting. It talks about how the tiers of soccer are in England, and then it goes in and tells a little bit about more of the European system, and then you start thinking, and all of a sudden there's an Italian league, there's a French league, there's a Spanish league, and then there's Asian leagues, and then there's Middle Eastern leagues, and all of a sudden you realize that this isn't just a game like SEC football where the SEC is involved. This is a worldwide sport.
Yeah.
And it had a worldwide pull, and also it had a very international pull. For when we started talking about soccer, we had all these guys who had transferred here with Boeing and IBM and all these other places, who came in and said, "Oh yeah, I used to play soccer. I played soccer in college, or I played soccer at this time." And I can sit in the stands, and the people right around me have played soccer. They've coached soccer. They're soccer experts, aficionados, and they understand the sport. And we've been very lucky to have one of the fans as a coach out at John Paul III, who sits right behind us, so I can always ask him when I have questions about what does this mean? What does this mean? He first taught me what offsides was, and then he started teaching me about some of the strategy.
The red cards, and
strategy,
the
yellow card, and then if you get 2 yellow cards, you get a red card, and then you have to play short. And and then the strategy of if you got 1 yellow card, do you stay in? Do you keep that person in? Because if he gets a second yellow card, all of a sudden you're 1 man short.
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating. It's been a fascinating education for me. But more than that, last night we had 4,500 people at that. There were 5,000 people downtown at the music festival at Jazz in the Parks. 4,500 people in the stadium watching soccer.
Wow.
And you can really say that any given night now, if you want something to do, you're going to find something to do in Huntsville, Alabama.
Absolutely right.
And to go along with that, I mean, when I first moved here back in '98, the thing was, what do you do? Because there was nothing downtown.
Oh.
And now downtown.
Should have been here in 1980.
Oh, yeah. And now we have, like you said, so many different venues to include the Orion now. I mean, I think I can't think of a day when you're not hearing an advertisement, oh, so-and-so is coming to the Orion this time, or so-and-so is coming. And then, like you said, the downtown, just the downtown experience.
Yeah,
I mean,
food trucks in the downtown,
right.
and an art stroll, buskers out there playing on the streets. You got the full thing. When we started off, we started this process, and I'm not a music guy. I mean, poor old Ben Lovett, he was trying to have a conversation with me and said, well, "Who's your favorite musicians?" I said, "Oh, Harry Chapin, Simon and Garfunkel, all these guys." And he's kind of rolling his eyes, but they did do a retake of The Boxer, Simon and Garfunkel. But we were talking about it, and he was a very good person to learn from. He sat there and he said, "Listen, I want to tell you, we were eating lunch, and he says, you're going to put in a full industry in here, an ecosystem industry." And he said, you got to have the place for that busker to play on the side of the street. And he opens up his guitar case and people throw money in, or maybe tip him or something. And then you got to have a place for those 2 to 3 people to play, which is usually a restaurant. Somebody's eating in the restaurant around there. Or maybe you want the place where, where 50 to 100 people can come listen to it, a Tangled Strings or something. And then you want a place where, maybe, some people who are kind of just starting to get popular, but can come in like Mars Music Hall. 5,000 people standing up for a whole concert. I can't understand the philosophy behind that because I'm not going to stand up
And
that
it's
long
loud.
anyway. And it is loud. Yeah, you have to wear earplugs. But and then he said, and then for those people who have grabbed the big brass ring, you want a place where they can come and play, and 8,000 people can watch them, like the Orion Amphitheater. And this is before we built the Orion, but like an amphitheater. And he said each one of those is going to take a business manager. Each one of those has a lighting guy. Each one of those has a sound tech guy. Each one of those has everybody who is put up has a gaffer or has somebody to slap their gear. Each one of these has the full elements of the industry, and you're going to build a whole industry here that that will rival anybody. And and I think we're getting to the place where we can rival Nashville. You go to any of the amphitheaters productions in Nashville, or you go downtown to their big center and watch a show. And how long does it take you to get out? An hour, hour and a half. The other night, I was out at the Orion 6 minutes to get out and get back home. I was back home in 15 minutes. And that's the magic of those shows. I mean, you can go to them, you can get out, you can get in your car, you can drive right back home. Yep. And you may haven't taken a whole night to do that, or I have to stay over and go back the next day. You've got a situation there where people can, get in and get out. And that was one of the things that our engineers and our people who built the Orion Amphitheater did so well, is to make sure that you have ingress, egress, places to park, and then places to get back out.
And, well, to go along with that, though, it's similar to what you said, is it's also bringing a lot of people into the city, right? Yeah. I mean, so you're not just having the folks from Huntsville, it's more of the regional area. Yeah. I mean, whether it be from Florence, Scottsboro, as far as Birmingham, there's some folks that come up from Birmingham to see
Doobie Brothers.
Right.
There's a couple stopped me. They're from Florence. Allison Krauss and Robert Plant played. A couple who were from Mississippi, right south of Memphis, sat next to us and said, "Yeah, we go to concerts all the time, and we really, this is our first time to be here." And said, "We'll be back because we'll come over here. We'll stay in a hotel. We'll go to the show, and then we'll go back to the hotel." And as you start building hotels, especially around here in Mid-City, you're going to be able to, we'll stay here and then head on back. And, and you see that time and time again. So you're bringing in huge crowds who get to see Huntsville, be part of Huntsville, and there's a cool factor to it.
Yeah.
We first started that off. We started 16 years ago trying to change the conversation about Huntsville, Alabama. Some engineer in Seattle would get a job bid, and he'd go home to a spouse and say, "Hey, we've got a chance to go to Huntsville, Alabama." The spouse's first response will be Huntsville with 1 question mark. Second response will be Alabama with 3 question marks because of preconceived notions and everything. And if we could get them to come visit, we had a pretty good shot at them. But most of them just turned it down right up front. Now, what we're finding is somebody goes home in Seattle and says, "Oh, honey, we got a chance to go to Huntsville, Alabama." And said, "Oh, yeah, that's where Stevie Nicks played on Halloween night. Man, I would have loved to seen that concert. And that's where so-and-so played last week, and I would love to see that." Or Time just came in and played there. Is that their name, Henry? Time? Time? Train.
Oh, yeah, Train.
Train
Drops
just
of
came in
Jupiter.
and played there. But, all of them, you start thinking about what does that do for your community and what does that do for your image? When you start thinking about Nashville, you don't think Nashville, Tennessee. You think Nashville. When you think about Austin, Texas, you don't think about Austin, Texas. You think about Austin.
Right.
Asheville's got the same thing. We're moving to that same pattern now, and it helps you grow.
A regional type of area, not just Huntsville, Madison County, but more the greater Huntsville area.
Well, it's also there's probably 42 Huntsvilles in every state has one, but you want to be the Huntsville, Huntsville.
There's a Huntsville in Ontario, Canada. We know that because we got a call one day and the guy says, "I've been putting my garbage out for 3 weeks. Nobody has picked it up, and I'm really mad about that." And he left it on the answer machine and left his number. We said, "Boy, that's a funny number." So we called him back, and we said, "What can we do for you?" He said, "I've been leaving my garbage out. Nobody's picking it up, and And I said something about, because we try to call back we call back everybody who has a complaint, but we said, well, give me your address. And he gave me an address, and we can't find that address. He said, where are y'all? And we said, we're Huntsville, Alabama. He says, oh, well, I'm Huntsville, Ontario. I said, well, if you need some help, I'm not sure we can make it that far, but we'll be glad to make some calls for you.
It'll cost you.
Yeah.
I want to set up the State of the City's coming up.
Yep.
2 weeks from tomorrow, right? And you just touched on a couple things that Huntsville and I think Mayor Battle as the leader have done really well. And just I've only been here 18 months, but I've interviewed a lot of people, and the predominant theme is doing the homework, right? And the soccer. Well, you're like, oh, you don't know anything about soccer? Okay, great. Let's go out and look at Nashville. And it's not just the game; it's the tailgating, it's all this other stuff. The music audit, right, where you hired sound diplomacy out of London to come in and conduct this thing, right? And it wasn't just build an amphitheater. You touched on those other things. Hey, there's policy that allows what do you call it? The busker?
The buskers.
The buskers.
They're the people who play on the side of the road.
I just interviewed a guy named Tim Connect. He's a busker.
Okay.
A few episodes ago. But there's always that, let's do our homework. Let's go find out. Let's do a study. Downtown Huntsville, they went out and looked at other downtowns, right? In the country. How do they do it in Chattanooga? I think it was one that they were really impressed with. So the State of the City is coming up. And so I commend you, right? I've only had some involvement with mayors in my life, and I don't think they did a very good job. And so you come here, and it's like, wow, Huntsville's different, and it always starts with the top, right? In any company, any organization, it starts at the top. So, and it's impressive. So here's some stats from last year. Now, I'm gonna release this episode on the same day of the State of the City in 2 weeks. It's just the way it works out. So anything you say now, it won't get released if you care. But I'm going to do kind of a tail of the tape here. So last year, that was your 14th State of the City. So now it's your 15th, right? And there was 460 people moving in per month, 4,500 per year, 3.7 million visitors per year. You took out your calculator and figured that's 10,000 a day. Coming to Huntsville or North Alabama, right? And contributing up 1.7 billion.
You remember it better than I do.
Into the economy. Is this all ringing a bell? And we have some notes for in a couple weeks on these. I'm assuming there's going to be an uptick in these numbers.
Well, I'm not sure. They won't let me see the script yet.
They won't see it. Okay. The average income.
I tell you, that is honest. We sit down and we talk about what we want to do, what we want to accomplish out of the State of the City, what we're talking about, and we have some great topics that we're addressing this time. And I say this is what I want to include. I want to include this, and then they write it. And my communication director is an old TV anchor person, and she's just ripping and reading. And I'm holding out. I won't give her some information she wants until she gives me my speech, so I can get started on working on it. But what it's meant to do, and what we're looking for is, number one, the reason for growth. A lot of people out there are saying, hey, we've grown too much. We need to stop. We've grown so much that we've got to, there's too much traffic. There's too many people in my grocery store. I had a guy at we were at this soccer game 2 weeks ago. And so coming out of the soccer match, and it was one of our older citizens, and he had his beer. He was sitting there, and he looked over at me, and all of a sudden he recognized me. You always tell when they recognize you. And he said, it's getting too busy. The roads are too busy, and there's too much growth. and I stopped and I said, if we didn't have that growth, we wouldn't have this stadium here, and we wouldn't have this soccer team here. If we didn't have this growth, we wouldn't have Cheesecake Factory. We wouldn't have the Orion Amphitheater. If we weren't a growing community, we'd be a dying community. If you don't grow, you die, and that's just the way it is with the city. And I said, and besides that, have you got grandchildren? Yeah, I've got grandchildren. Have you got nieces and nephews? Yeah. I said, if you don't grow, you don't offer them an opportunity. You don't offer them an opportunity to come and take a job and to get a job.
They're going to move.
Yeah, they're going to say, I'm going to the big city. I'm going to the thing. My son did it. He came out of the University of Alabama in finance. And I said, son, there's a lot of banks here. You want to come back to Huntsville? He said, no, I'm going to the big city. So he goes off to some of what he called the big cities, and he enjoyed it and everything. But we started growing, and as we grew, one of the local banks who was being started by one of his friend's fathers, they called him and said, listen, we've been watching you. You've been doing a good job with the bank you're with. We'd like for you to come run our Jones Valley branch. And he called me and he said, Dad, y'all grown a little bit, and because of your growth and everything else, they've called and given me a job offer, and I think I'm coming home. Well, I tell you what, as a parent, grandparent, or whatever, if you hear those words, I think I'm coming home, all of a sudden you know that you've won the lottery, that you've hit the big ball out of the park. And that was one of the things that kind of told us as we started having young people saying, hey, you're kind of the place of preference. We're looking to come there because we can go to the Ryan Amphitheater. We can go downtown. We can go to Top Golf. We can go to Dave & Buster's. We can go down to the sand volleyball, and we can run around an old golf course and run the running track and running trails down there. Or we can have a pickup soccer game, which they do, just about every night of the week. And they're all looking for something to do and a reason to be here, and said, or we can go listen to music at the Ryan, at the Mars Music Hall, or downtown, just wandering around the square. And when you do that, you put in a quality of life that attracts people. We're always going to, I think we're kind of set. We don't want to grow exponentially. So we want to grow 4,000 to 4,500 a year, maybe 5,000, but I'd rather do it 4,000, 4,500. And if we grow to that degree, we can keep up with it. We can keep moving forward. Right now, we're building the Maston Lake overpass in the northern bypass, which goes out Research Park Boulevard all the way to Parkway. And those two add to our transportation grid. But right after that, we're going to have to add more roads. And we know that. We already have our list in mind, and we know what we're going to have to do. But we've got to be able to, A, we've got to be able to grow, but B, we've got to be able to keep some of the same quality of life that we've always had. Not a slow quality of life, but a quality of life that offers things to everybody and offers opportunity to everybody.
Yeah, and what you said is you want to be the best city. You don't want to be the biggest city necessarily. And great is good, but great is kind of like, well, that's kind of nebulous, right? But being the best.
Yeah, and big doesn't mean anything. Being the best is what means something.
You could have told that old man if that other guy, that preacher man, got his way, he wouldn't even be able to hold that beer.
Yeah, I might not have, but I didn't want to go that far into it. But it was really kind of a telltale conversation because that's portions of what we're going to be addressing in the state of the city. We're going to also be addressing some uniqueness, and this is a challenge. I'm glad you're doing this the day that we do this thing, because my communication director said, well, you want to point out things you're unique in, but you don't want to say that you're unique. I said, well, how do we do that?
Yeah.
She said, that's why I'm in communications. I said, go for it.
I'll tell you. Go ahead, Kerry.
I was going to say, so one of the things that you and I talked about way back when, was setting up Cyber Huntsville. I mean, I think that you had the vision for Cyber Huntsville and said, okay, let me get some folks together. And that's what you did. And then they came across, and then not only forming Cyber Huntsville, but then also doing a Cyber Summit, which when this gets shown will already be passed. But I mean, we have the National Cyber Summit here now. And can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, being a first term mayor, I was really kind of interested in what do we need to do for the future, because we've always had kind of our eggs in the Department of Defense basket. We've had Research Park, we've had the Arsenal, and especially back in the 80s and 90s, there was a whole lot of talk about we don't have enough diversification. We have not diversified enough. And so I was sitting at SMDC conference my first year as mayor I was sitting because there's a couple of general officers I wanted to hear, and one of them was General James Cartwright. They called him Hoss Cartwright. He was Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff, and he started talking, and he started mentioning this thing called cyber. And if you remember 15 years ago, cyber, nobody knew what cyber was. They knew it as hacking or, IT. And so he started talking cyber. And after he said about 15 times, I said, I need to find out a little bit more about this cyber and what the industry's like and what's out there. Fortunately for me, we were doing industry visits and talk and round tables. And at one of the round tables, Peter Kiss from Centaur was there. Centaur has a big cyber contract with Norfolk in the Navy, and I was talking about what General Cartwright had said, and I said I need some expertise in cyber, and Peter says we know a little bit about this. He knew more. He was he had his doctorate in it, but we started from there, and we grew a core group of people who were interested in the cyber industry, and the cyber industry is just blown up now. It's what is it, half $1 trillion industry today, and we have grown with it. And as we have a lot of companies who work in the cyber world, you never realize that we have a lot of people who work in the geospatial worlds, which is mapping, and you didn't realize that. And you put both of those together, and you got a very big case for diversification. You're diversifying away from just Army Material Command missiles, NASA rockets. All of a sudden, you're into cyber, and then you're into geospatial, and those two industries are base industries that take you to other places. You can use them to take you to cyber insurance, to cyber quantification. How much is my cyber system worth, and to this and that. You can take the GIS. It's a platform for everything, for satellites in the sky, and to mapping, to everything else that affects you. Diversification is key. If we don't have that diversification, we cannot, we as a community will not continue to grow. So we diversified using the cyber method. Same thing we did in 2012 when we started we had 200 jobs open up at Toyota Motor Manufacturing. We had 10,000 people apply. 10,000 people for 200 jobs. We did the same thing at Polaris. We opened up, I think, 300 jobs at Polaris and had 11,000 people apply. And, it told us something. Chip Cherry, who's the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, and I were sitting there talking. He said, that just tells you have a lot of underemployed people. So we started looking at it, and we had a very good entry-level job, so a good number of entry-level jobs. We had a good level of upper-level jobs. If you're a rocket scientist, if you're a degreed professional, if you're, a doctorate, have a doctorate and all that, very good job base there. But in the middle, we didn't have those jobs. And back in that day, we would always hear from the north end of town, which is kind of lower socioeconomic portion of town, used to be, now it's not. And they would say, we're not part of Huntsville's success. We're not part of Huntsville's progress. We don't have jobs. We don't have the big fancy stores. We don't have new houses up here. And it said, we're being left out of Huntsville's success. And, it was something that you really hated to hear. And you would say, well, do they really have a point? And they did. They were exactly right. They were not part of it because their kids coming straight out of high school who could not go to college or didn't have the wherewithal to go to college or didn't have the money to go to college, they were kind of at a dead end. There was nothing there. When we changed and started going after advanced manufacturing, we went after, we started with Remington, which was, a lot of people say Remington bankrupted and that was trouble, but we got our money back. And also, they were the springboard. From Remington, we got Cabela's, and the president of Cabela's had just moved over from president of Remington over to Cabela's, and that gave us a sales tax to be able to do Polaris. And then we did GE Aviation. Then we did Aerojet Rocketdyne. Then we did Blue Origin, and then finally we did Mazda Toyota. And after Mazda Toyota came Amazon. And all those were advanced manufacturing jobs. That's where a kid can come straight out of high school, or they were even taking kids with GEDs. And if you work hard, you're going to make $40,000, $60,000. If you work overtime, you're going to make $80,000 a year.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, we filled that middle gap. And when we filled that middle gap, people, we don't hear the same thing that we used to hear from up in the lower socioeconomic areas. And in fact, houses are being built there. There's new jobs up there. There's new retail going in there. And so, the full picture of it is that economic development has to have some kind of strategy and some kind of plan, and you've got to diversify the base that you've got, but also you've got to make sure that you cover all bases for everybody in your community. If you do, then you're going to be a success. Yeah. Everybody's going to be part of the, I say part of the opportunity. Everybody's going to be part of the success. And if everybody's part of it, then you work together as a team, and that's been key.
Let's give a shout out to, you spoke of Centaur. So Stephen Pratt from Centaur is your chair, right, of the Cyber Summit. And just on a personal note, I was up at CIA for 20 years in Virginia, and I moved down here with my company, and the first thing I did was go to the Cyber Summit.
Yeah.
And that's what sold me on Huntsville. And part of that is in your talk track, which I'm assuming you'll repeat in the State of the City, is we're trying to make commute times 18 to 20 minutes. And I would say even more importantly, you mentioned it earlier, getting out of the ballpark in no time, right? And many of us who come from massive cities like Washington, D.C., that is an all-night experience just to try to go to a Commanders game or something, it sucks. Yeah. And so I am living proof of, like, I'm all in on Huntsville with that's how I was recruited in. Wait a minute, it's only going to take me 18 minutes to get to work? Yeah. And it does. If I want to go, I'm just outside Gate 9 in COPT, right, at the gateway. And you just mentioned getting involved. That's the other thing that I've heard time and time again from people. Like, you know what? You may not have the same luck in Birmingham or Mobile or something, Montgomery, if you're not in the right pedigree. But you come to Huntsville and you want to be involved. And case in point, I'm going to be interviewing this guy who was a former director of CISA.
Yeah.
Fired by tweet. Donald Trump fired him. And I don't think we're going to really focus on the election, but this guy's a fascinating guy, and you should go watch the 60 Minutes interview and everything he did to defend the election that they secured. Yeah. But 2 years ago, I was a nobody as far as, at Huntsville, and then you just get involved. Hey, I want to be involved. And that led to me being invited to moderate this fireside chat. And I think, I have my own personal story and personal, testimony, if you will, to it works here in Huntsville.
So to go along with that, Troy and I were talking a little earlier. You talked about your restaurant, and I told Troy you did some barbecue competitions and stuff like that. So more importantly, what's your favorite restaurant, or what are some of the restaurants in town that you think? Because I told them a story about how you and I said, hey, let's go meet up for lunch. And you said, let's go to G's. And I said, where's G's?
I didn't realize that you didn't know where G's was.
I didn't until...
G's is great. There's a lot of restaurants here. I mean, some of them are chains. Some of them are locally owned. Walton's is one. Bob Baumhauer's, we ate there today. It's tough being mayor because you want to go to all the different restaurants. Sure. You want to try them all out, and then there's some that have opened up that you hadn't even tried yet.
Right.
You're still trying to figure out what is the best place to go to. They're all, you can look at me. I haven't found much food that I didn't like.
Let's ask a slightly different question. Yeah. When you ran for governor, it was awesome that you visited all 67 counties.
Yes.
Driving in your Ford, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was a Ford SUV. There's a pretty cool picture. Yeah. In fact, I might even have it.
Ford truck. Yeah.
Ford truck.
Yeah.
There it is. Here, I'll bring it up. Yeah. Come on.
150, and it was aluminum.
Oh shoot.
We were.
Is this called Murphy's Law when things don't work?
Okay, keep working on that. While we were doing it,
there it is. I got it.
We had these old magnetic plates that said "Battle for Governor" on them, real big. And I got my magnetic plate, and I went out to my Ford 150. I said, "This is going to look so cool. I'm going to have it on both sides." I stuck it up there, and it falls down. Boom. I said, "What's wrong with this truck?" And it was aluminum instead of being steel.
There it is.
Okay.
So there's a shot that they did, and touting the fact. Now, so similar to what Kerry was just saying, I told him the best Mexican food I've ever had was in Anchorage, Alaska. Mm-hmm. The best fish and chips I've ever had was in Ottawa, Canada. And the best I had Singapore Lo Mein in Rock Springs, Wyoming. So my question would be, where are the hidden gems in the state of Alabama, of the 67 counties that you visited? Because there has to be some.
G's is definitely a place you have to see. Walton's is a definite. They want the best restaurant and the best meat and three in town, and it's very, very good. You go down to Birmingham, Nicky's on the, I think it's 78 East or something. It's an old cafeteria style. It still runs the old cafeteria style. I mean, just really good yeast rolls and everything else that you probably shouldn't eat.
Definitely shouldn't eat.
We found some little places that were just dynamite, and then Mobile. Mobile has good seafood. Mobile, Baldwin County both have great seafood in there. So, if you're looking for a place to eat, I would keep a list and go all around the state, because there's some great places.
Yeah. Before the time is probably getting short, I want to ask you 7 questions.
Okay.
Fun questions.
All right.
Okay. I used to call it, because there's 7, I don't even know what to call it. We'll call it
the Lucky 7.
We'll call it Tommy 7.
Okay.
Or the Mayor 7.
Tommy's.
Mayor Battle 7. So we were just talking about road trips. What is your road trip snack? You have to stop at a gas station, or you know.
You gonna tell them about the gizzards, or do we have to cut that part?
Gizzards.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Fried chicken gizzards.
Oh.
You can't eat them too often, because you get a sack of them for $4 and they last you for days. You just they hang on you for days. But I love fried chicken gizzards.
Is that like in the same bag as like the pork skins, like near those?
You go into a convenience store, the Wavahos or the other convenience stores,
Okay.
a little Sitco out on Greenbrier.
Okay.
Stop in there. Tell me you want some chicken gizzards now. They're a little chewy. and they're fried up, but they're
All right.
good.
All right. If you, assuming one day, Huntsville's still a secondary market, right, in size. I believe when I interviewed Ethan from the zoo, we were the 110th largest city in the country. So we're still, all these things are coming, right?
Yep.
And so eventually we'll be a primary market, thanks to you and your city and others, Paul Finley and Madison City, of course.
Sure.
If an amusement park was to come here, what is the ride that you would want like the most say in? We got to build this ride.
Oh, the tilt whirl.
Tilt whirl.
Going around that thing and zip, and it gives you the G's, and you go to the back.
Yeah, that's right.
And everything does tilt whirl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite zoo animal?
Oh, favorite zoo animal. There's so many of them. It probably, just because it reminds me of dealing with life, it'd have to be the monkeys.
Okay.
You look at those monkeys over there picking fleas off each other, doing this, that, and other. It reminds you of life.
Have you watched Chimp Empire yet on Netflix?
No.
Oh, it's a fascinating documentary.
Okay.
4-part series. You have to watch it.
All right.
It's over in the Ngogo in Africa, and they followed these chimps for like 4 years. They have names. It's fascinating. Highly recommend it to you. Well, it's the last treat you snuck to your grandson that you weren't supposed to.
Let's say I gave him a marshmallow pie this morning.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not preferred breakfast food, but I thought it was excellent.
Okay, of these 3, if you weren't the mayor and you weren't in retail, we're gonna do it since we're in aerospace. Would you rather build the plane, guide the plane, or fly the plane?
Ooh, I'm not one of those guys who can just take instructions and follow instructions, or even make my own instructions go. I'd rather fly. I'd like to be the one flying the plane. It would be interesting. People with me would have their mouth wide open, but I'd love to fly.
Now, I know we didn't yet talk about any like sort of athletics growing up, but do you have a good luck charm? I don't know if you were like a baseball player and 3/4 in the pocket.
Oh no, I played football for Berry High School, and I wrestled. In wrestling, I usually watch the lights real closely because I was on my back trying to get off of my back. But there weren't any real luck charms. Coach taught us real quick. And that was a great thing about high school football. He taught a bunch of young guys that you could go a lot further than you thought you could go.
Mm-hmm.
You thought I've run 10 sprints, I'm done, and they'd say, get on the hill. We're going to do hill climbs now. And he taught you that you can push yourself harder than you ever thought you could, and you could do some things. And Coach also taught you make your own luck. I mean, you make your luck because you work hard. If you work hard, you'll make your own luck.
Now think of, this is the last question, anyone that you would like to go back and thank, a teacher, a coach, that if you had the opportunity to thank them for turning you into the man that you are today, who would that be?
It'd be Coach Finley. Coach, he was our high school football coach, and Coach Bradley, who was there, and some of the others. I mean, they were people who hit us at impressionable years where our bodies were changing, we were changing the way that we're thinking. And I would definitely, it would be Coach Finley, and then we had Miss Columbine. And Miss Columbine was a debate coach, and she taught us to think. How do we think? And it was very interesting as we learned how to think through problems. Think through. When you went into debate, your first debate was on the affirmative side. The next one was on a negative side, then affirmative, negative. So you had to learn how to argue both sides of an issue, and it made you look at both sides of an issue. And that was probably one of the most valuable things I learned out of high school and the first year and a half of college when I debated at the University of Alabama. No matter what you say as you go in, you got to look at the facts. Don't set yourself in stone. Jim Miles says it best: reserve the right to change your mind. Look at the facts and play into the facts, and then try to add to your facts so that you make sure that you're doing the right thing. We did that every project we have done. We have come in. I'm always the no person, and we've got some people who are yes, we need to. And I make them go through the process of justifying it several times over. And as you justify it, you come out with knowing that you're in the right place, that you're making the right decision.
Gotcha. Well, I think we're coming up on a hard stop, right?
Yeah.
We got to, unfortunately, let you all go.
I'll be at 45, you're at 41, so
Oh, we got a few minutes.
4 minutes. All right. What would you do with 4 minutes of your life if you had 4 minutes left to be able to tell people whatever you were going to tell them?
I'd eat a moon pie or something. First, just to make sure.
So the question I'd have is, what would you like to see Huntsville? I mean, we've talked about the regional and everything else. Mm-hmm. What would you like to see Huntsville in the next 10 years?
Huntsville is, the next 10 years is more of some of the same, more roads,
right?
More ways to travel, looking at innovative ways to travel. Right now, they're looking at aero taxis. The Jetsons going around, zip. And, what about those people sitting over in Decatur? If all of a sudden we had aero taxis that would take 20 people at a time, and we could pick them up at a place in Decatur, bring them over to Redstone Arsenal and to Research Park, and then go a circular route, could you save yourself on having to build future roads and have to have future right-of-ways? Mm-hmm. The technology that is coming out is just amazing. This AI push, which I know about enough to be dangerous with, but the AI push and everything, the technology-wise that is coming out, we're going to be able to take stuff that is made right here in Madison, Huntsville, Madison County, and use it to make the world a better place. There's a guy sitting right here in Madison who's making drones, making huge drones every day, but then he's talking about, when I was asking him about it, the aero taxis and some of it, he says, oh yeah, it's going to be a reality. There's a young lady named Alex who's at Moontown Inc., who has been in the middle of the aero taxis in that world, and she's pushing hard, and we're trying to drain every bit of intelligence we can get from her, because she's a smart person. And how do we make sure that we keep up with the technology that's coming in the future and use that technology to better our lives? Lots of things that can be done here that I'm excited about. We've still got quality of life issues sitting out there that we've got to keep pushing on. Those quality of life issues, they're everything from the music scene to the exercise world to craft breweries, which we didn't mention. That's part of your recruiting process is the craft breweries. Low Mill, the largest single artist colony in the privately owned in the U.S., sitting right here in the middle of Huntsville, Alabama. If we can keep pushing those kind of ideas out and using those to springboard off of for future growth, development, and fixing our next growth corridor that goes forward. We have been through Hampton Cove, Taylor Lane, Zert Road, and now down to South Huntsville. But you always got to have a growth corridor. If you're going to have a successful city, you got to have a growth corridor. Our next growth corridor probably going to be out to the southwest towards Rockhouse Landing, and all of it just makes sense on how we put together our city for not only the next 10 years, but what we're doing now hopefully plays into 30, 40, 50 years from now.
Yeah, and verbatim from your speech last year related to the cyber school. It's the first statewide tuition-free magnet school for cyber engineering in the United States.
Yes, and it's huge. We were out there about 3 weeks ago making an announcement, and you could see there is I walked in, and the intelligent quotient just fell like a rock because there are some smart young people out there. And we've got to make sure that when they get finished here, they go off, get the best education they can, but they come back.
Yeah.
If they come back, they will make us a success. They're the job multipliers.
Well, Mayor Battle, it is not lost on me how much I appreciate your time. I've held off on introducing myself to you and the various events I go to just because I figured one day I just wanted to have this opportunity just to talk, right, and kind of interview you. And I know everybody wants your time. So
thank you.
I really means a lot for you to come out the county line on Limestone County where I live, right? But just really appreciate your service, your leadership, and everything you do.
Thank you.
And literally all the episodes, I've learned so much from this great city and the great people that are here.
We have a good. The interesting thing is everybody says, "Oh, you do such a good job." It's not me. We have a great dynamic leadership team, and it's a team. Everybody works together. As long as we have, people ask me, said, "Who are you going to hire?" And said, "I don't need a star running back. I don't need a star quarterback. I need someone who's going to be a good teammate, teammate, and we can keep working together, and we work together for the betterment of the future, and that's what we've got."
Kerry, thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the time.
Good to see you.
Same here, as always.
I hope you'd want to come back someday.
Love to.
I'd love to have you back on and just dive into a million other things that we didn't even get to.
Love to.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor Battle.
Thank you.
Have a good day.